From The Conversation, this is Politics with Michelle Grattan.
One Nation continues to dominate much of the federal political debate, with strong polls and its leader Pauline Hanson speaking out on immigration, superannuation and much besides. This comes as the party shapes up for its big test in the Victorian November election. 4 months ago, at the Farrah by-election, One Nation won their first ever House of Representatives seat since the party was formed. The seat of Farrah in southern New South Wales was previously held by either the Liberals or the Nationals, and most recently before the by-election by Susan Lee, who resigned after she was rolled as Liberal leader. David Farley, a former chief executive of the Australia Agricultural Company, won the seat comfortably against a high-profile independent and well ahead of the Liberals and the Nationals. Farley delivered his maiden speech last week to the federal parliament, focusing on the role of agriculture and giving a commitment to return productivity and capacity to Farrah. David Farley joined the podcast to talk about his impressions of Parliament and of his new colleagues, as well as issues including immigration, artificial intelligence, and telehealth for voluntary assisted dying, on which he voted with the Teals. David Farley, you've had now quite a few weeks of the parliamentary sittings. How have you found things so far? And is it what you've expected, and what's been challenging?
Well, it's everything that I expected. First of all, I expected challenge, both on challenge of learning parliamentary procedure, challenge on understanding the workings of the bureaucracy, and then, of course, being one of two lower house members inside One Nation is introducing and becoming effective within the party itself. So, yeah, look, there's been challenges. It's also been quite exciting. The good thing that I can comfortably say is that for our mantra at the campaign, which was to bring back productivity and capacity to Farrah, I believe we're walking in the right directions. We've made good steps. We're leaving footprints behind, and those footprints are accelerating now.
Now, of course, your other half in Parliament in the lower house is Barnaby Joyce. Have you found that he can give you some tips?
First of all, he's an amazing guy. He's very genuine. He's very authentic. He's extremely experienced. And of course, he knows everyone. And he knows his way around the House and the Senate as well. So I haven't had, Barnaby's been with me for probably a maximum now of 4 days out of that 6 weeks. He went to Europe, first of all, after my first day. And I had a lot of learning there quickly by myself. He's returned. But he is a powerful mentor. He's willing, not only willing to help me, but he and his team are willing to help my team. He is a valuable asset in Australian politics, regardless of what party he's on. He's authentic, he's genuine, and he's a true Australian.
Now, One Nation is a different sort of party. We haven't seen its like, I don't think, in Australia in recent times anyway. How have you found settling into that party?
So, yeah, you're definitely right, Michelle. It's a different party. It's a party of realism. It's a party of courage, political and personal courage, and it's a party of tenacity. It focuses on the issues. It doesn't have to report to anyone else. It reports to the constituency that it represents. And it was the party that I selected because I could see the heavy lifting that's required to be done in Farrah in particular. I'd watched the coalition work Farrah for well over 25 years in my lifetime. I watched the Labor Party's commitment to Farrah, and as you saw at the election, was pretty shallow. They didn't run a candidate. And I also realised that the size of the job, it was beyond an independent. So I needed courage and tenacity and someone who was a party that was prepared to leave a footprint on Australia, and One Nation's got all those attributes that I need.
Now, you say you selected One Nation, but you did flirt with others.
Oh, definitely. I spent, first of all, my political engagement in Australia started with the LNP in Queensland under a magnificent steward of that party was a guy called Bruce McIver, very equitable man, very fair. When I finished my career at AOK, I returned and I joined the Nationals in New South Wales, the FEC of Farrah, And I found that trying to get true engagement on the true issues to address policy that it wasn't working. We were travelling big distances to meetings that would only run for 20 and 30 minutes and they'd be over, predetermined. And there, I walked away from that party. They didn't want me, and at the end of the day, what I had to do, I didn't need them.
And you did sound out Labor.
Oh, definitely. With the help of Joel Fitzgibbons, actually. I went to Joel with all the issues, and he said, right, I'll introduce you to all the right people, which he did. And when it really came down to prosecuting a case of what we needed in Farrer, it became pretty obvious that, and this is after talking to the transport workers, the meat workers union, the United Workers Union, the whole lot, and bringing a case to the Farrer leadership of Labor, as they said, look, the bottom line is the Greens at the moment is where our power is. It's in the Senate. And all those issues, David, we would find it hard to prosecute those issues because we'd only be fighting the Greens. So literally what's happened is that the union movement in Farrer, or the union representatives in Farrer, which has just been shown with what's happened to the rice grower employees, have become like second-hand girlfriends to the Labor Party in preference to the Greens.
Now, Pauline Hanson has counselled, to put it gently, Malcolm Roberts over some of his fairly wild ideas and conspiracy theories. You've said things that are at odds with One Nation's line, not conspiracy theories, but different policy positions. Has she at any stage called you up and said, don't say that? I think there was an occasion when someone called you up in the campaign.
Well, it was through the campaign, and of course, we're going through a campaign, getting to know each other. Post the campaign, first of all, One Nation is about democracy, and in a democracy, you do have the right to be able to challenge each other and debate each other. We've had good debates over immigration in particular, because immigration is very important to Farrer, right across from our aged care through to our meat workers and our agricultural chains. And in there, we've had to come to a position, and I feel comfortable with the position that I've been able to come to with immigration with the party itself, that it doesn't put any threat with Farrer at all.
Just elaborate that. What is your position, and how do you read the party's position?
Well, I read the party's position as, first of all, extremely sensible. Sensible to the extent that if we're going to grow the population, we need to grow it with the infrastructure that population needs. It needs housing, it needs education, it needs health, and it needs law enforcement. So if we just can't open the door and be blind or deaf to the needs of serving society. So that's why I comfortably agree with the cap that One Nation's talking about.
Which is 130,000.
It's 135,000.
Right.
It's 130.
And that's the net overseas migration.
That's the net, right? Now, on top of that is our PALM program, which we use in our meat workers. On top of that is our aged care skilled nurses, our medical skills as well. Now, they're coming in on rotating visas that are there. Now, they have the option to apply to become long-term citizens of the country, that's when it refers you back to the net number. But at the moment in regional Australia,
that's the non we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the non. Yeah. So in regional Australia, though, how we sponsor these workers first of all, to get productivity and make sure they're well looked after, accommodating them is very, very important, and making sure that they've got access to what services they need. So both industry itself, our advocacy groups, and our farming groups in particular, make sure that they have got the infrastructure to meet the demands of the labour they require.
Now, do you know what that would take the figure up to above 130,000?
Coming in and out, when I look right across Australia, it's probably circa another 40,000 a year on top of it. But that 40,000 has been there rotating year on year out now for probably 2 or 3 decades.
So do you now have a different position from Pauline Hanson on migration? When we spoke to you during the Farrer campaign, there was a difference.
Oh, there's definitely a difference. And
so where are you compared to?
Right now where we are, we've been able to negotiate in the party. Pauline's very respectful of what's required of migration in agriculture, and more in particular, very respectful of what's required of migration in Farrer in particular. Those same questions that are reflecting Farrer will be the same questions that will get contested on the northern side of Victoria at the coming election. Again, there's industry there that are very, very important on rotational migration labour. So what we've arrived at is a position The net number, we agree 100% on.
Yeah.
And then we're making sure that we've got the rotating migrants in our businesses, especially the PALM, the skilled nurses, etc.
That's your position?
No, that's now the party's position as well.
And do you have a different position to that?
No, not at all. No, we matched our positions. We negotiated our position to arrive at it.
Right. From even your early parliamentary career, you do seem basically to play your politics your way. And I noticed that in that vote recently on telehealth for voluntary assisted dying, you were with the Teals, with the very small minority that voted against both the government and the opposition. Now, does that reflect doing things your way, or how does that?
Well, first
operate?
of all, you don't go in and make that vote with it talking to your party, and it's a conscience vote there. I've lived in remote Australia. I've worked in remote Australia and experienced in remote Australia, and I've been there when life expires on a lot of people. A lot of people that I've met and travelled with would adopt this option, mainly because most people in the bush, at least as they depart this world, would like to depart with dignity. And unfortunately, the end of life strips a lot of that dignity away from you. And that dignity to access these type of services could be 4 or 5 days away on a mail truck. It's not readily available. And I think if Australia really wants to understand it, they should go and watch that iconic movie, Last Taxi to Darwin, about the taxi driver in Alice Springs who drove himself to Darwin all the way through to explore and address voluntary dying.
I want to return to another issue being put forward strongly by One Nation, and that is that there should be changes to the way superannuation can be used. What's your position on that? Do you think it should be preserved for retirement only, able to be used for housing, other things, or that we shouldn't have the present scheme at all?
Well, I think, first of all, the present scheme's good, and we should have the present scheme. It is not flexible, agile, or elastic enough to meet the environment we live in today. The environment we live in today was perfectly demonstrated last Friday night when 79 families sat around their kitchen tables in Leeton and Griffith. Due to policy, they've been made redundant. Now, those 79 families would be young families. The majority of them would be young to middle-aged families.
What industry are we talking?
They were talking about the rice industry and the redundancies that they've just gone through. They will be addressing their mortgages, their car payments and their cost of living. They haven't got a job. It's highly unlikely they'll get a job in the towns that they live. That means they'll be selling a house, moving house, etc., incurring more expense. They're structured in a way that they won't be, Centrelink won't be of assistance to them at all. What they'd be looking at their assets, they'd be looking at their superannuation and saying, is this a point in our lives where we need to be able to access some of this? Then on the other side of it, there's people out there who are reaching a point where they definitely need medical assistance of some size and volume that won't fit into the public service scheme. And they're saying, if I want to have a better life, I've got to fix my back, my knee, my hip, my shoulder. How can I finance this?
Can't they access that at the moment?
Well, they can access some of it, but it's a pretty rigid program and lengthy program to get about. But the reality, Michelle, is that the environment we live in today isn't the environment we established superannuation under. Today, the cost of living, the inflation on cost of living is enormous, and it's got no sign of abating. It's going to keep rolling on and rolling on. And therefore, people are facing circumstances that they require elasticity in managing their balance sheet, and on that balance sheet that they own is their superannuation. I'm not a proponent to say let's exhaust it all, but I'm a proponent that says we must put the owner of that superannuation to meet their circumstances. And if they're in dire circumstances today, superannuation could be one of the best and quickest ways to meet their demand.
So one of your big campaign issues, maybe your biggest campaign issue, was water. To what extent have you sought and to what extent have you been able to obtain access to the relevant ministers to discuss this? And do you think you can make any progress?
Well, first of all, yes, our campaign was based on, our slogan through the campaign was to bring back productivity and capacity to Farrah. And what we talk about there is productivity is in our agricultural land and capacities in our secondary industries of logistics, processing, and just running communities. That's health, schools, hospital, law, etc. What progress are we making? We're making good progress. My first question at question time to the Parliament was directed directly to the Minister of Defence, Richard Miles, and that was focused on, Minister, are you and your department engaged in the review of the 2007 Water Act? Are you and your department engaged in the review of the 2026 Murray-Darling Basin Plan? And are you and your department engaged in the drafting of the Australian Food Security Document? Now, I ask that question in particular because when you actually go over to the Defence papers and their policies, water is in there quite clearly. And at the moment, water has only had the eyes and the lens of the Department of Environment and Water on it. My second question then was to the Minister of Crisis Emergency Management, Christy McBain. My question to her was, Minister, have you been able to negotiate with the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder a water allocation for drought and crisis to keep our food system alive? Now, unfortunately, Minister McBain didn't get a chance to answer that. Minister Burke answered that question on her behalf and made it quite clear that water wasn't available. My third question was to the Minister of Environment and Water via the Minister representing Burke was, Minister, the projects that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder wanted to achieve in 26 are just about complete. With the coming rains, they will be complete. Could you ask the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder to audit their position and any surplus water available from their program be immediately put back into the productive pool so farmers can either finish their winter crops or establish their summer crops? Now, that got quite a response back from Tony Burke. But what we have done now, we've moved the needle that we've got, instead of one lens on water, we've got two departments with their lens on water. Our question this week to the Minister again, via Minister Burke, was trying to determine where was the equity in the decision of $2.5 billion bailout for Tomaco in the smelting industry, when we had 79 families in Leeton and Griffith being made redundant on principally water policy, when water was available, the rivers were flooding, the dams are filling, and the government could have quickly credited the environment the flood water and then credited that offset credit to the dams and made that water available, which would have negated those redundancies. And at the same time, in the regional reconstruction money, the $360 million, rice growers in particular requested matching $15 million of grant funds from the government through the New South Wales government to build a $30 million plant. They were going to invest $15 million. The state government rejected that, and now rice growers will look like shifting that plant to Vietnam. So again, we've got opportunity in there. Now, good thing about that is I met with Minister Burke yesterday evening, and then following that meeting at an event I was at, I met with the Prime Minister, who was right across it. To answer your question, are we making progress? Yes, we're definitely making progress. We've got different eyes on it, we've got different lenses on it, and we're actually demonstrating now that government policy, in particular to union management and to families, is being biased to one industry against the other. And I'm pretty sure that the Labor Party doesn't want that bias, and I know we on the Conservative side of politics don't want that bias. So yes, we're making progress.
In those sort of interactions like you described last night, what sort of a reception do you get? Because obviously One Nation is being treated very much as the outsider by the main parties. But at a personal level, how does the Prime Minister react to you? How does Minister Burke react to you?
I found it very professional. I found it that we stay on topic of what I'm there for. I have the ability to be very concise with my narrative, why I'm here, what I need to talk to you about, and they respond. I've found no malice in it or no aggression. More in particular when I'm talking about 79 families being disenfranchised out of their working life. When I talk about the bias, the smelting industry against the food industry, I get really good buy-in. When I talk about agriculture and the environment, there's a bias probably from the Labor Party to the environment as opposed to commerce and agriculture. But it's just probably my perception of it. But the reality now is that policy is biting hard and it's disenfranchising regional Australians out of their jobs where they've got no hope of getting another job.
When you say buy-in, you mean buy-in from the government, from
Correct. Yeah.
those ministers. Yeah. Let's turn to AI. Now, these data centres, which are going up everywhere and going to be spreading quite fast, use a hell of a lot of water. What is your opinion of the centres, and would you like to see them in Farrer, and are there any plans at the moment for them in Farrer?
Well, first of all, my opinion on the centres is if we want to keep Australia abreast of technology and where the world is going, we need to engage in the development of sustainable data centres. We need to be very cognizant as we go into them of what is the demand of a data centre. And there's two critical demands. Baseload power is important. Not intermittent power, not solar power, not wind power, baseload power. And the second one is water. So what we need to be able to determine is very quickly, and it can be done very quickly, is how much water is required, and therefore how much electricity is required. Then where do we get that from? Do we disenfranchise the great urban metroplex out of their water and out of their power? Or do we disenfranchise the food chain that feeds the metroplex out of its water and out of its power? The bottom line here is that the government needs to get in front of the curve, both sides, and start planning the natural resource management. I sense that it's something that both sides of government haven't focused on. You've got to have your lens on 2050, where the nation's going. You just can't have your lens on the next election cycle.
So what about Farrer?
Well, with Farrer, if we can put the resources in place and manage both the power and the water, I would promote that we accept data centres in Farrer.
Now, just finally, the Victorian election is coming up within a pretty short time, and it is seen as a big test for One Nation. How do you read that election, and will you be campaigning in it?
How do I read that election at the moment? I found it amazing that here it was, the polling in Victoria put One Nation in front even before candidates were announced. So that was telling me that the constituency is looking for change. Now that candidates are being announced and the calibre of the candidates, it gives me confidence that One Nation has got their act together. I feel a lot of the issues that we campaigned in Farrer, especially across regional Victoria, will be the same. I think management of debt, Victorian debt, and infrastructure is going to be a massive issue. What Victoria needs is the ability to design its operating budgets away from debt. It needs to put efficiency inside it, and therefore it needs representation that's got tenacity and courage to do it. And I believe One Nation, the way they're structuring themselves, running the campaign and selecting their candidates, should perform extremely well in Victoria.
David Farley, thank you very much for talking with us on the podcast today. That's all from us this week. Thank you to my producer, Ben Roper. We'll be back with another interview soon, but goodbye for now.
Production by Ben Roper, theme music by Lee Rosevere. The Conversation is a not-for-profit media organisation. Sign up to our daily newsletter for evidence-based news and analysis, including articles from Michelle Grattan, or listen to more of our shows wherever you get your podcasts.